Hello friends, I am Rob. Welcome to the Lair of OmnusI. I am here today to talk a little bit about gaming philosophy. And it's Rob because this is more about my personal philosophy as much as anything. Of course, OmnusI would be like, as far as gaming philosophy, as far as everyone is having fun, and there's no one right way to play, and so on and so forth. But this is a little bit more about my personal tastes and things. And specifically how it dovetails in with the philosophies of the folks at Gooey. They include in their boxed adventures this article called The Gooey Way, Our Philosophy. They also have a segment on their house rules and their methods. Both are pretty good reads, and they can be accessed on the gooeycube.com website. So you're free to, stop and go and watch that if you, just read through it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this because I think philosophy in gaming is something that, it fascinates me. Because if you don't understand the philosophy behind things, sometimes you're just reacting to whatever comes in. You're all input without any kind of output. And as far as I'm concerned, part of mastering the craft, and especially as it refers to gaming because it's so participatory, is that if you fail to understand the whys, the wherefores of the game around you, then you're just reciting. You're just, participating without necessarily adding anything of your own or going out into different areas because you realize there's other ways of playing besides your own. Now, I fully realize this. I know there are some excellent players out there who play in a very different style than I do, but they have a table full of happy players, so they're doing it right. So, as far as Gooey does their thing, we will almost certainly agree on most elements, because I find that, first of all, primarily the folks at Gooey are a diverse lot. At their helm is my friend Alphinius Goo, not his real name, but it works, and he kind of brought a lot of them into the fold of enjoying and loving gaming, which means that they're not, veteran gamers necessarily, but they've been playing for a few years, some maybe less than that. And Alphinius certainly, and I don't know if anybody else in that circle has played as long as we have, but we've been playing for 40 years. So with that comes a lot of perspective. I've played more games than he has. We've talked about it. I've got more breadth, and I may have played in a few more convention games than he has. So my perspective is a bit more diverse and eclectic. He, however, understands role-playing very, very well. And as I said, we share a lot of core ideas. We've talked and really kind of enjoy talking about gaming in general and the thoughts behind it and the philosophy. And he wrote out a prospectus. Well, I don't know if he wrote this, but it's basically about their core philosophies that form their foundation of the approach that Gooey takes. What makes a Gooey adventure different from anybody else's is at its core in their philosophy, and that's pretty cool. You don't see this necessarily from, you'll see a blanket statement about the company, and they're all about entertaining, and they're all about coming out with creative ideas and things like that. Anywhere from Goodman Games to Troll Lord Games to Wizards of the Coast, quite honestly. But I like Gooey approach. As a small company, they can have a much more personal approach, and their roots are right there in this philosophy. So I'm going to read this section, and this is, of course, one of the elements that really does form, again, a foundational approach to their games. And if you haven't had a chance to read this and you really never thought about this, well, maybe you might come up with some ideas from this. I will go segment by segment so the video is not over long, and there will be multiple parts to this. So the very first part in this article, besides the introduction to the Gooey crew, is great lore makes the game epic. Great lore doesn't happen overnight. It begins as just small threads that grow and twist and spin over time, like a magical fabric, to form a vibrant, colorful, and rich tapestry of adventure. This ultimately results in amazing, complex, and rich backgrounds and backstories that will make your game stand out from others. While fantastic lore doesn't have to begin at the beginning, we found that it helps if it starts there. Within the pages of our modules, you'll find intriguing introductory stories that will feed into campaigns that are replete with multiple intersecting storylines, mysterious strangers, dark and dangerous places, hateful antagonists, surprising plot twists, and more than a few beguiling paths for your players to choose. These key facets are what separate role-playing games from tabletop combat games. Largely. I'll go with largely. And the difference couldn't be more important if you love RPGs. My take on this is there's a few other elements that are equally as important as the lore. If you play, for example, the Warhammer 40k game, which I have, and you play the role-playing game, you're really immersed in that lore because you're a character that's in that world. If you play the tabletop game, the war game, I'm not going to say those people are that much less invested in the lore than I am, having played the role-playing game. It's a big step going from what is a bland fantasy or sci-fi combat game to something that's got so much lore invested in it, so much storyline, novels written about it. I mean, you know, just massive amounts of material. So that isn't necessarily what separates role-playing games from tabletop role-playing games, and it's not the only thing that makes just tabletop role-playing games epic. It can help out in other areas too. To me, the most important thing in a role-playing game is having the freedom to slip past the bounds of very, very tight, narrowly defined options for what you can do. Like in a video game or in a tabletop war game, when your options are maybe shoot, advance, use a power, and that's about it. In role-playing games, anything you can think of has maybe a chance of happening. It might fail utterly, but you know, you could try just about anything. That's why you can tell the veteran gamers who have so many things in their packs. Not just, you know, whatever fit in that adventurer's pack, but, you know, because we've learned that a 10-foot pole has 100 uses, and that isn't something that'll ever be replicated in video games to the best, anything I can think of, certainly. So, that's a big part of it to me. But I agree, having great lore is fantastic. It's wonderful. It's not my main focus when I'm running, you know, your default games, because I rely a lot on what my players already know about their given world, and that's probably not entirely fair. I mean, if I'm running Forgotten Realms, I know some of the guys haven't read all of the books, and I know that there's at least one player who knows way more about it than I do, because I haven't read all of the books. But at the same time, I know fantasy, and I know the general thrust, the thumbnail sketch that you get from reading over the game books. So I can do a pretty good job of running it, but I probably could do a lot better at making it feel like you're a part of the world. It's something that I need to work on. I'm not a perfect dungeon master by any stretch of the imagination. But I acknowledge this, and I'm working towards getting better. So, you know, this is something that can improve my game, is adding lore and things like that in higher levels than what I do. I will acknowledge this. All of our pre-generated characters are created specifically for the campaign in which they're destined to play. Essentially important for the Darkest Dream, where you start out in a carnival troupe. If you just take Joe character from off the street and put them in there, you can of course say, yeah, you know, you're a recent hire into the troupe, but all of those characters are richly detailed in, and I have a feeling that's a central element into the game, at least going forward. So by grounding those characters, even with a nice little, you know, 3 or 4 page essay on what it means to be a part of this troupe, and then all the characters have their own backgrounds and ties to other characters and secrets and twists, yeah, they definitely back that up, no question. They always have intricate backgrounds, true, fascinating attributes, and even some unique talents. I never looked at them that closely to say that, but I believe it. Totally believe it. We believe they will offer some wow to your players, even those who've played for a long time. These characters help further the game lore and will enhance the overall campaign, but it's never required that your players use them. If they would rather play their own created characters, or you would prefer they do so, do it. So, it is up to you. Ultimately, it's your game, and you can do with what you want. They just put a lot of effort into those characters. And, again, from what I've seen, each one of them has about a good 3 to 4, maybe a little bit longer in paragraphs and, what their life was like, what their outlook is like, how they got those powers that they've got. So, there's a lot of thought put into those characters. I was pretty wowed by just looking at them and realizing what this could mean to somebody when I spread these characters out in front of my group. It's like, okay, who do you want to play? They have a lot to look through, and they have a lot to go, oh, wow, okay, cool. So, typically, our pre-generated characters are also relatively tough in terms of stats and hit points, though often they aren't very well geared. This is an interesting element. A lot of people complain that 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons characters are too powerful. They're superheroes, just from the get-go. I assure you that characters can die, especially first level characters. So, their characters are quite tough. I've looked through it, and yes, they're very strong. But at the same time, they're not invulnerable. And a lot of them have vulnerabilities that strike at the heart of their character, so it's fair. As far as the gear goes, Dungeons & Dragons is a game of character advancement. One of the first ways that you advance after that first level or two is your gear gets better, hopefully. And that's why, just like running into energy-draining undead is an unfortunate occurrence that can cost you some of your hard-earned work, so is running across a rust monster and watching your armor fall to the ground in tatters that you paid so much for, or, you worked so hard to get. So, yeah, those are elements that are important in a game, and I'll agree that priority is pretty sound. Now, yes, if you want to play a weak character that is constantly in danger of dying, plenty of games to do that. I would say if that's more of your you want the characters to stay feeling very, 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 very mortal, games like Eric Bloat's The Darkest of Deaths is pretty spot on for that, because your characters never advance to the point where you feel super heroic, and the threats are always way more than you can handle. So if you like dying a lot, that's your game right there. So, continuing on. If you run a more standard group of first level characters through most of our starting adventures, it's going to be really tough for them. Heck, it's going to be tough for any party of first level characters. That's just the way that works. That said, we always give you some options to help keep encounters from being overwhelming for a standard party, and they do. If you watch the video that I did on the Darkest Dream, I show you on the stat blocks for the encounters. It has weak party, where again you have an underpowered party, or one that's not optimized, or one that, let's face it, doesn't work well together. As Alfinia said in his promotion of the Darkest Dream, what, your characters fireball themselves frequently? Yeah, there are groups that do that. And they have an option for weakening the encounters in a way that's already designed to work with the encounter, rather than just pulling out a critter here. And, there's thought behind how to make it weaker but still fun. Likewise, if your characters are more powerful and you find they're just steamrolling everything in sight, there are ways of making the encounters more powerful. And you don't have to do this on the fly. That's already baked into the stat block so that you can run it like that. So that's cool. I do appreciate that element of that human touch that goes into it. Quite often, adjusting modules is something that is kind of an art. But if they're going to make it easy and give you shortcuts, that'll help a lot of people out who are running games, relatively new at running adventures like this. So that's good. One more thing. Most of us GMs want to make sure we lawfully follow the rules to give a fair deal to our players. Most, I think, is kind of assumptive. I think a lot of game masters out there are, they have their hearts in the right place. They are rooting for the players. And they may neglect the odd things that would make their game really realistic, so as to give the players a little bit easier time when they really need it. And, I'm not one who ever will tell you I run everything by the book, unless I tell you I'm running the game by the book, as the case for the Dungeons & Dragons game I'm running right now, Castle Caldwell and Beyond. where I told them I'm running everything as is, and we had 3 character deaths in the first adventure. So yeah, but I don't tell you that because my games are more narrative in scope, and occasionally the universe can throw the players a bone from time to time, but they get into this. We agree with this, but we don't agree that your players should miss awesome and amazing parts of an adventure just because they skipped an encounter, failed a pickpocket roll, didn't find a certain secret door. Boy, that's... They wouldn't have put their name to, say, something like Tomb of Horrors, then, that's for sure. But that's a different time and a different purpose. Failed to spot an object they needed, or missed the roll to locate the hidden niche with the map inside it. So, for the sake of the story, for the sake of fun and interest and mystery, and for goodness sakes, just because we put so damn much effort into that area of the plot line, we nudge. No, not fudge, nudge. So, there's a slight difference that we'll get into in a second. There, we said it. And I, for one, feel so much better now that the air is finally cleared. I can almost hear Elphidius saying this. It's great. Because the truth is that most GMs do nudge. Again, you might not fudge, but nudge. There's a difference. And they're absolutely in the right by doing so, because nudging really can enhance the game. This means that sometimes we may, reasonably and appropriately, push the players in a certain direction. Fudge a spot roll. Drop a hint. Or make sure an encounter happens for the sake of the story. We don't do it all the time. But when it's needed, we think that good GMs will intercede to make sure an important action is completed, a crucial item gets found, or a required clue is discovered. That's all we're going to say about this. Well, I'm not done. So basically, there's a couple of elements that go into that philosophy. Now, of course, they have shortcuts, or you can always have it so that your plot never relies on one little thing coming up. Or you have multiple avenues to get to that thing. For instance, if the players need a map to get to the next dungeon that's important in your story, you can have a copy of the map in a niche that the players could find. But if they overlook that niche, it could also be something in the High Priest's diary that's down in the 2nd level. It could be something that a scared prisoner knows who's trapped in the 3rd level prisons, about to be sacrificed. And he's very grateful when the party rescues him and will draw that map out for them. So that's not necessarily fudging, it's nudging, which the players, if you're doing it right, have no idea that you do it in the first place. But if you write it into your game that there are multiple avenues of success rather than relying on just one, and by the way, on my personal philosophy on requiring just one element, a choke point in an adventure, sloppy writing. Just, in general, it's relatively bad writing. You may say it's realistic, but quite honestly, I just have some serious personal issues with it, again, because it sacrifices fun on the altar of being realistic, which I don't believe ever makes anybody's experience all that much better unless you're doing it for, soulless competition, for example, a tournament. Okay, then it's fine. But if you're doing it because you're running a story for your friends, or you're at a con and you're like, you didn't find that thing, therefore it's a failure. No, I can't say that's a great way to run things. I'd definitely much rather nudge and have my players enjoy things and have a much more memorable experience as a result of that. So I think nudging is fine, and I think, again, most game masters would agree with that. If you only run very, very, very serious simulation games where, the hand of the game master is actually off the throttle because everything is already dictated out already, well, then you're going to run your game. But as a player who has been in those situations and been frustrated because we didn't find the one MacGuffin and it just seems like everything else collapsed around it, sorry, I can't say I think that makes it more fun. I would rather get to the end of your story and find the cool thing at the end and have something to really remember the game for, rather than just, well, that kind of sucks. Oh, well, that's just not what I think is important. Now, I also don't have a terrible problem with fudging, which means, rolling a die roll and, well, you actually do see them. Quite often I will, go for weeks and weeks on end without ever having to do that, because sometimes failure is fun. And if the dice decree it, I'm fine most of the time with letting the players fail or encounter stiffer resistance than they were expecting and having setbacks. But at the same time, for instance, in my Mighty Protectors game, I'm rooting for the heroes. I really want the heroes to be the protagonists that I believe they can be, and triumph over the bad things and get to the end of my storyline and really be able to make a dynamic difference in it, possibly even winning it. Coming out with the best possible ending. They've been doing a fantastic job so far, and I think they should be rewarded by seeing what it's all about several months hence. But at the same time, bad things happen. And sometimes seemingly disastrous things can happen. I've had characters get hit dead center with an exploding missile that could, devastate a tank, and had them walk away with some limp away with broken ribs or maybe being knocked out, but not killed. Some are the mechanics of the game. Obviously, it's hard to kill people in a superhero world. That's just kind of written into the whole thing. I know there are some comics that are different, but let's be honest, most of us are talking about the four-colored comics that we're familiar with, like Marvel and DC. Even Image and ones like that, Top Cow and other ones that I've known in the past, are generally, their superhero worlds are superheroic. They don't have people just die for no reason, or even if the reason is compelling, they want to keep their characters around too. But I don't believe that fudging is a terrible thing. I believe that fudging and letting your players know that you're fudging is an evil to be avoided at almost all costs, because if they don't think that there's any danger, if they think that you don't actually have it in you to kill their characters, they'll start acting recklessly. They'll start treating the game like there's no consequence, and I don't think that's fair to them either. Just like you shouldn't take away their successes, you shouldn't make them feel like you're cutting the corners off their bread and taking away their failures. They don't feel then that they've earned the successes they have. So honestly, I don't think the DM screen is something that should be banished. I think when you make a roll, and sometimes it's just one that you need to change the result of to keep your story going, to keep the players engaged and interested and not feel like it's futile because their characters keep getting turned into mulch. Yeah, I think fudging is appropriate in certain times. And yes, I know there are game masters out there who hate it. There are game masters out there who will say, I can't believe you do that, or, well, I don't do that, and that's good for you. I'm hoping your players enjoy that facet of you that you don't hold back. Some people really like that challenge. They like that give and take. They like the adversary at their throats, and the feeling like those victories are hard won and clawed out. That's cool. My players will tell you all about the great stories they had, the cool things that they did, the amazing situations they went through, and sometimes escaping by the skin of their teeth, or one lucky roll that we all celebrated together. So, And when I roll poorly, and goodness knows it happens, I don't hesitate to look over at the guy on my right and go, look at that. Can you believe that? And they believe that my rolls are terrible, and often they are. I have such bad luck. But when it comes to nudging, I believe that's an element of good game design. I believe that having multiple avenues towards success is generally a good thing. And if you're going to have something that you need a key element to engage, like for example, you find an intelligent sword that opens up another area, make it optional. If the players don't find that intelligent sword, their game doesn't have to be any worse for it. It certainly should not be the thing the whole thing hinges around. That's my thought. And, you can feel free to disagree with me if you like, but as I said, I've got a lot of experience in this, and I know when I've been frustrated by what I perceive now to be bad game design, and also I can appreciate when maybe it was giving a hand to a desperate party who had no clue, but some of those early adventures were really rough on that regard. I remember, and I can't remember the adventure offhand, there was one where we found some sort of a stone structure that was supposed to give us a hint on what we were supposed to do. And we were given about half an hour to look at it, try things, nothing. Eventually, we kind of figured out that a glove that we had found figured into it, but we never thought we had to put the glove on the circumference of it and see how many times around the glove would fit, or something like that. I just remember it was frustratingly just abstract. It just literally required people who would try just everything and see what would happen. We didn't do that, and the Game Master eventually said, you eventually figure this out because you have a wizard who's really smart or something like that. I don't remember. Maybe it's because my character was so wise. I don't remember, but it was a cleric, so. But yeah, I never would do that to my players. Never. I know many of them hate riddles, so that freezes them out whenever I use riddles, so I do it sparingly and usually only with really important, a point to it. And if there is something that I want to have them lead to an avenue, I never rely on one avenue. That works very well in sandboxes too, by the way. Litter your sandbox. The cat would not appreciate that expression, but litter your sandbox with clues and hooks. Don't rely on just one. If there is, for example, a dungeon that you want your players to get into that, kicks off a quest line, you can have them hear about it in an inn, and then if they choose not to go after it, maybe the high cleric says, we lost a priest who went in there. Could you go and see if you can return the remains if he died, or find out what happened? We would hate to think that they found something profane. And then, go on from there. That's, in my mind, the best way of doing it. Now, as far as all of the lore, oftentimes that is the purpose of lore, is to provide you with interesting avenues, nudges, but also plenty of things for your players to engage in and want to pursue. I can't read something like, Pool of Radiance without going, gosh, not even that I cared about the characters. I didn't like most of the characters in Pool of Radiance, quite honestly. Brother Tarl was kind of cool, but Shal Bal was, God, no. And Ren of the Star was, yeah. Dragon Bait was cool. I didn't care as much about the characters as the locales and wanting to be there in that instant and having my characters perceive the wonder of the city they went into and feel the dungeon they were in and test my skills against that, not just what the characters did. It's still one of my favorite, D&D adventure books, but, it wasn't for the characters. It was because the locales were really cool, and the general, gist of the idea behind it I thought was pretty good, and could easily be taken to set up your own challenges as a, world builder, which is cool. Disembodied evil that can possess, powerful creatures and constantly be a thorn in your side. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that idea. I wouldn't want to overuse it, but it would make for a pretty good story potentially. So, and of course, if you remember, in the end, they didn't defeat the big bad evil guy. They accomplished their immediate objectives, but yeah, the Pool of Radiance was pretty good because it was a good introductory. It formed the party, gave them a vector, a purpose. They went through it and got past the first challenge, and then after that, if you don't read on, you don't get more invested in the lore, it just leaves a interesting what would happen next. So that's cool. So yeah, I'm pretty in sync with most of their ideas. Again, I don't necessarily agree with the same priorities, but I never think that immersive lore is a bad thing. It's always nice to have something to hook into, and as a game master, if you have access to that lore, you can put that much more detail into what you're giving your players. Now, Gooey Cube, of course, again, in their philosophy, they take it a step further. They let you show the players the places they see. All of that fantastic art they've got in their books is not just there to entertain and amuse you. It's there to immerse your players, and yourself, honestly, so that you can really feel like you understand this world, that you are a part of it. And ultimately, I think that's a nice part of the escape that role-playing games offer, is that ability to feel like you're not in the same space you were in, that you're not in the skin that you wake up in every day, that you're someone else in a far-off place that may not have all the power of your potential just yet, but you can do things that don't fit in our world. That you can save what you need to be saved. That you can change things that you bend your mind to. And perhaps maybe it's wish fulfillment that you'll get those incredible powers and things like that. A great game master can let you feel like you get to that point and earn every bit of it as you play through their adventure. So, and again, remember, it's not just their adventure. Once players are involved, it's a group shared experience. And as they say, you know, great lore makes the game epic, but without the participation of everybody, which I think is the next little factoid of their philosophy. Yeah, it's an excellent starting stone to take off from, which is why I'm so looking forward to running the Darkest Dream, because I can't wait to share that lore with my group. And while they may grumble at first that we're not going to the Forgotten Realms that some of them are quite familiar with, the ones who are most familiar with it are open-minded enough to try a new world and something new. And I think Xayathay is very captivating in its own way. So I'm looking forward to it tremendously. Can't say enough for that. As far as their philosophy, it does dovetail nicely with mine. And that's why I think Alphinius and I get along pretty well, and I'm rooting for them to succeed big in the future. Maybe even inspiring some of these other game companies to really double down and think about how they can make their games better. I never want to see, you know, Troll Lord and Goodman Games and other companies like that try to do the same thing that Gooey Cube does. I'd like to see them stay special. I'd like to see them be the company that puts in hundreds of dollars worth of art packed in their box to share with your players. I think that other games that have their little black and white illustrations are fine. And there's a time and a place for that. But if I had my choice, yeah, I can't wait to run the Darkest Dream. I almost kind of wish that I had gone with that instead of Castle Caldwell and Beyond, but I hadn't had it by the time I started this adventure. And I have a very good feeling that my players are going to be itching once I show them this box set and all that comes with it to run this game. I already know my wife is. She saw it and she's like, I can't wait to run this. I'm like, yes, ma'am. So, yes. So that's the first part of their philosophy and my thoughts on it. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Maybe it gave you some ideas for yourself. And I think that, you know, again, analyzing your philosophy is healthy. It's a good thing to do to grow and progress. So until next time, when I'll be covering the next step, I suspect, I appreciate you coming here. I am Rob. Thank you for joining me here at the Lair. Until that time, farewell.